Hello, this is the lecture for Lab 100 for the Related Fluid Power class. What you have in this frame right here is our training board for related fluid power. If you look at these blue components here that are mounted on the board, those are what are called directional control valves. And we do have 9 of them shown on here, but in reality there are only 4 different kinds. In other words, we've got multiples of some of these. Also on this board you will find that we've got 2 cylinders. I've got one here and then one up here as well. And these cylinders are called dual acting, meaning I can put air on either end of it. And they are called a through rod, meaning that we have a rod on either end of the cylinder. This piece in the middle where my arrow is pointing right now, right here is where we would put our supply. And each one of these fittings that you see along the top here, you can put tubing on there and go to the different valves that you see around the board. And this is referred to as a distribution manifold. Okay, let's go to the next frame. And in this frame, you see what we've got are the symbols for those different components. And as we go through this, I will show you that I've moved some of those symbols along with the valves so we can get a better idea of what all these different things mean. By the time you are done with the course, you should be able to recognize and understand what each of these symbols are. Right here I have enlarged a section of our pneumatic training board, and these are the actual 4 different valves that we use on that board. We have this one here, which has a spring return on this side, and it's got an external pneumatic pilot on this side, and you will learn about that. Same thing here, this little black block here on the end is actually a spring return, and this is a mechanical actuator, meaning that something from the machine that you're working on would physically move this. Over here is a manually operated one, meaning that I've got a lever here that you would use your hand to shift it. And again, this black bar over here, this end cap, has a spring under it, so this is your spring return. And then our 4th one over here, even though it looks a little bit different than this one, these have external pilots on them as well. So you use air to get this to shift, both to actuate it and to return it. Okay? And again, we see the cylinder, we see the manifold. Here I've listed the first valve. You can see that's a 2-position, 5-ported 4-way valve, and you'll learn all about that. It has an external pilot that would actuate it or cause it to be operated, and a spring return. And in this symbol, that's what you would associate with this type of valve. It shows this is my external pilot, and over here you can see that there's a zigzag line that's supposed to represent a spring. Here's our mechanically operated one, and again here's our roller cam, and you can see I've got a roller on this, or at least a circle that represents the roller. On the other side I've got a spring, and if you remember what I said in the last frame, this black cap on here actually has a spring inside it. So that is a spring return. Here's our 3rd one, manually operated. In other words, I've got a lever that I pull or shift this with. This represents that lever. Over here I've got my spring. Again, there's the black cap that represents that there's a spring under here. Over here is the valve that we use air to shift it, and I've got that on both ends. So I've got an external pilot. The dashed lines means it is pilot air. We'll learn all about that. And then, of course, that is what we have for our 4th one. So those are the 4 different types we actually have on our trainers. Here is our pneumatic manifold for distribution of the air supply. And you can see that this end right here is where you would connect your supply air. It would then go down, and all this is a square block that has been drilled out and obviously tapped so we can connect fittings to it. So that's what you see here in all these positions. And at the other end, it's actually drilled all the way through. So here we've got a plug that will keep it from leaking. There's also openings on this side, and we've plugged all those, so we don't need those. But that would be your distribution manifold or air supply. Here's your pneumatic dual acting through rod cylinder. And again, by through rod, you can see that I've got a rod on either end. And by dual acting means I've got air that I can put on either end of this to get it to extend the red ball and retract the red ball. So whichever one we are working with or wanting to keep track of, it would, when the red ball extends, the black ball retracts. When the black ball extends, the red ball would retract. So they're connected in the middle. And here's the representation for that. On our benches, we do have an air distribution system, and this is kind of what it looks like. This has been, ours is all connected together, so it'll look a little bit different than this. But you've got what is called an FRL, or filter, regulator, lubricator. So when our air comes in, we filter it. We then have to adjust what we want our pressure to be set at, so that's our air regulator. And then on our other end, depending on what we're using it for, we may have lubrication or we may not have lubrication. Just depends again on what we need it for. But this would be a lubricator, so this could be filled with oil and send that oil downstream to tools, cylinders, valves, anything that would need lubrication. Okay. This frame actually shows us what are called the ways through the valve, and we will learn more about that, but I just wanted to show you a picture of it. This one here that says, it's hard to read, but it says MAC. MAC is a brand of directional control valve, and here I've enlarged the symbol on the valve body, and then here's a generic one as well, so you can see what that looks like, and you'll learn all about what this all represents. This is another trainer that we will be using, and we've got a number of things on here. We've got a cylinder that is hanging from this framework here. I've got a couple little cylinders here, and then I've got a pneumatic motor connected to a belt. And what we do is all of these are operated through pneumatics. So we've got a number of pneumatic valves here mounted on a manifold, and you will learn about that as well. And we will actually be wiring to this and making it work later on throughout the 16 weeks. Here are some more symbols, and you will see more of these obviously, or you will see this again multiple times so that you can start to gain an understanding of what the symbols represent. But on the other frames above this, you did see some of these symbols already. In other words, here's your there's an external and an internal pilot. There's your external pilot. Notice the dashed lines. The internal pilot doesn't show those dashed lines coming into it. Little difference there. There's our lever, our manually operated. Oh, here's the mechanical one. A little different than what we had, but you can see that there's a round ball-shaped symbol at the very end of it, and that would be similar to our roller cam that we have on ours. Okay, here's our different types of cylinders that we could be actuating or operating with the different types of directional control valves. Here, they're talking about number of what do we got? Number of positions, number of ports, and we will get into this, and there are different ways to look at this, but you will learn about this as we go through the program. In Lab 100, just gives you an idea of what some of the things are that you might be exposed to or understand throughout this program. Okay, that ends this lecture for Lab 100. Thank you for listening.